What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Hands-On channel. Unfortunately, we have to talk about something today, another failure of our government, not only our federal government, but our state governments and our local governments. And this whole thing, to me, reemphasizes the fact that we all need to be preppers. We all need to be prepared for whatever natural disasters may threaten you and your family in your area. And that's kind of like regionally specific, so obviously in Hawaii, they've got lots of like tsunami warnings and sirens and things like that. And we're going to talk about that, why they didn't blow those sirens, those tsunami sirens, or notify people to get out of there quicker than they did. And in many instances, families are being burned up and stuff. They're finding these families huddled together, burned together inside their homes because they weren't given the proper notification to get out of town, right? I mean, of course, when you start smelling smoke and you start seeing things and you can look outside and see the winds blowing 100 miles an hour or whatever, I mean, that should be a pretty good indication that you should take precautions and get yourself and your family in a safe place. But many of these people didn't listen to the warnings. They didn't heed the warnings that were out there and obvious for most of us that would have eyes to see and ears to hear, would be able to recognize that, right? I mean, I live in tornado country, so we're always under threat in the springtime, especially, of tornadoes coming out, basically a big sky funnel coming down and sucking you and your house and everything you care about up into the air and, destroying that thing that it hits, right? So, I mean, that's one of the things I have to prepare for here is tornadoes. So a lot of people will build tornado shelters and we have tornado sirens and things like that. But I can't imagine an F5 tornado blowing through here and not having the sirens go off. So there were a lot of failures in Hawaii, and I want to discuss some of those things. Now, some of these things may have been unavoidable because they just weren't set up for it. I mean, again, those sirens were specifically made for warning people to go to higher ground for tsunamis. So an argument can be made of why they didn't blow the sirens. They were afraid people would go into, higher ground and stuff like that. But let's get into some of these headlines. And I wanted to wait. I didn't want to come right out. A lot of people come right out in the beginning before they have all the information. And they like to make videos and stuff acting like they know all this stuff. Well, guess what? I'm not from Hawaii. I'm from the central United States, a place where we get tornadoes, not tsunamis. So I wanted to absorb all the news articles that I saw over the last week or so before I made any comments, because, when you come out of the gate swinging, oftentimes if you don't have a target that's, a specified target, then you'll swing and miss. And I don't want to do that. I want to knock a home run out of the park right now. So let's get into some of these headlines. Horror. Charred remains of entire families were found huddled together in Maui homes. Morgues are running out of body bags. Initial reports they were saying there was 1,000 some odd people missing, and some reports are saying it's as high as 2,000. So who knows? I guess time will tell. We'll find out what the final count is, but it's obviously a tragedy. And my thoughts and prayers go out to anybody that's been directly affected by this or even indirectly affected by this. I'm sure a lot of you guys have family out there that they were allowed to be burned up, man. And all of the governmental safeties that were in place failed, every single one. And that's who we need to blame. And while you're casting blame on other people like the federal and state and local governments for this calamity that's happened out, probably the worst fire death count that I'm aware of, at least in modern history, maybe in our entire history. I don't know on that, but it's just unbelievable what's going on. Next headline. You can't make this up. Maui's emergency operations chief has no background in disaster response. I mean, if you're going to have an emergency operations chief, don't you think the guy ought to have a background, or the girl, in disaster response? I would think that would be like one of the critical requirements for that job position. But they offered an absurd excuse for not activating the sirens during the wildfire. And we kind of briefly touched on that a moment ago. He basically said that the reason they didn't activate the sirens is they were afraid people were going to go up into the higher ground, which is what you do when a tsunami's coming. And obviously the fire was at higher ground. And they were worried that if they blew the sirens, some people would automatically go to higher ground because that's what they're for. And they would basically be walking right into the fire. Now, I would argue that people would probably, if they had that inclination, they would probably see the fire and the smoke before they just walked right into it. But I mean, I don't know. And I don't know how elaborate these sirens are that they have. I don't know if those sirens, I mean, are they just basically loudspeakers? Could they have, put out some sort of a message in addition to blowing the siren? They could have been like, warning, wildfires. This is not a tsunami. Head to the ocean. Head to safe ground. Get out of your house. Whatever they could have done. I don't know if they have that capability or not, but it would seem like if they don't have that capability or didn't have that capability, that in the future they would. They would go ahead and, design that system so that it could be overridden with, voice commands. If they don't want to have just some joker do it, have a robot voice do it, whatever. Have some pre-programmed, emergency instructions set up inside of this thing to where if this ever happens again, we can make sure that, hundreds of people aren't burned alive with their families huddled together inside their living rooms and shit. I mean, this is just unfreaking believable. And you only get this level of incompetence when you have somebody like Joe Biden, the guy that supposedly got 81 million votes, right? Remember that? Anyway, moving on before I go off on a political rant. Next headline, is the government of Hawaii lying about the missing and dead on Maui? So I'm not going to go through the entire report, but this report from the Gateway Pundit, they were saying that they got a hold of a person who's a Hawaiian resident. I don't know if this person's a reporter or what, but they were saying that the body count and the death count was going to end up being, the missing people was going to be around 2,000 people, not 1,000, and that they were speculating that the death toll was going to be well over 1,000 people dead. And right now, last time I checked, it was 110. And every one of those lives, that's tragic, man. I mean, I can't imagine. To me, when I think about different ways to die, being burned alive is the absolute worst thing that could happen. Because I have been burned before, and some third-degree burns when I had a motorcycle accident. And burns, let me tell you, they're very, very painful when it happens. And not only that, healing up from them takes a really long time, especially as you get older. Anyway, it's just a tragedy, man. And that's one of the reasons I didn't want to report on this. I don't like always coming out here and pointing out this gloomy stuff that's just, it's just constantly happening under this current administration. Next headline here. Ignored warnings, hubris, slow response fueled America's deadliest wildfire in a century. So the deadliest wildfire in a century. And so far, it's 110. Is it going to be 1,000? I mean, my God, man. Children and stuff, women and children were burned alive because of government incompetence. Biden finally says he'll visit Maui, but first, a 6-day Lake Tahoe vacation. Could you imagine, let's just do a little tit for tat for a moment. Could you imagine if this had been George W. Bush during Katrina or Donald Trump during some natural disaster that happened on his watch? Would the media be allowing this level of hubris of Biden just basically blowing off the reporters? Somebody came up and asked him a couple of days ago, hey man, what's going on with the Hawaii thing? What are y'all doing? No comment, Joe Biden said. Somebody made a meme about it. It was the most clear thing Biden has said in his entire presidency. No comment. You could actually understand what the guy was saying. It wasn't some muttered, weird, made-up word like he normally uses. The media lets him skate. They let him get away with, I'm going to say murder. This is on his hands. It's not only on his hands, it's on the state of Hawaii, the government of Hawaii, heavily Democrat for like the last 20 years at least. This is what happens when you bring in a bunch of diversity, equity, inclusion hires that have no fucking experience on how to, take care of disaster response. But anyway, moving on. Water requires conversations around equity. Oh, does it now? Meet the racial Obama-loving official who delayed life-saving water to Maui for several hours while the fires were contained. So, there's this clown, and I didn't write his name down. You can go look him up if you want to. I believe this article was from either Breitbart or Gateway Pundit. But this clown, who was in charge of all this stuff, had a policy of water requiring conversations around equity before they could send the water over to the storage tanks that these firemen needed to help control the fire. This guy waited like 6 hours or some odd crap. I mean, they got the request. There was a whole bunch of back and forth and stuff, like through email and stuff. And this is an emergency situation. They needed this water. And this guy was in the background wondering if it was going to be equitable for all the other residents downstream. I mean, we're in a fucking inferno here. We need water now. And this guy is delaying the response for DEI purposes. That's who's running your country into the ground, people. That's why whenever all hell breaks loose and you're wondering when's the emergency response going to happen, and it never does, and people end up being crispy crittered in their own fucking living room, this is government's fault. This is government that did this. So, on the ground in Maui, a reporter's first-hand experience of the disaster and a whole bunch of unanswered questions. And it was refreshing to see this reporter actually ask a lot of these questions. I'm going to have to get my ACGs because we're into some anti-communist stuff here. So let's ask some questions that the mainstream media is afraid to ask. So this first question, I want to know why people weren't evacuated before the fires began. Just because of the strong winds and the likelihood of downed power lines and the high risk of fires? I mean, that's a perfectly logical question. I mean, we've got a day when we're going to have all this hurricane force wind. It's potentially going to light a fire off, you know, and there's all these power lines going on. What are we going to do about this? And why haven't we evacuated these people just in case, right? Good question. Next question. I also want to know why the downed power lines weren't de-energized as alleged in a lawsuit. So there's a lawsuit going around right now that these power lines stayed on. So the energy company, they knew that this wind, there was a big severe risk of wind that day. They could have, you know, in advance turned the power off and warned people, hey, look, we're going to have to shut the power off, especially in these areas that are going to be affected by direct wind, and just in case, so we don't start any fires. So the ignition source appears to be power lines that were energized. And then even after they hit the ground, they didn't turn them off. Highly unusual. I saw another report that were saying that transformers were exploding. And I've actually seen a transformer explode in real life. One time when I was a kid, I was walking home from a friend of mine's house and there was a big thunderstorm. And that's why I was heading home. We were hanging out at his house and I was like, man, I better get home before it rains, because I was, you know, I wasn't driving at that point. I was a kid. So I had to walk home or ride a bike or whatever I was doing. Well, as I left his house, I turned down the street, and I swear to you, I've never seen anything like this before, but a bolt of lightning, I saw it in my peripheral vision. A bolt of lightning like hit over here, and I saw the power line actually glowing with lightning as it headed towards a transformer. I mean, of course, keep in mind, this is like at, you know, electricity speed or light speed or whatever. It was super fast. This outside of this power line lit up with the lightning bolt, and it went straight towards the transformer that I was walking towards. I was probably 75, 100 feet away from this transformer. When it hit the transformer, it went off like one of the loudest explosions I've ever heard in my life. Let's put it that way. It was definitely louder than a 12-gauge shotgun going off or something like that. It was huge, and it threw hot, embery sparks all over the place. Needless to say, I turned around, went back to my friend's house, and just hung out and kind of regained my composure, because that scared the crap out of me, man. I was like, holy crap, I didn't know transformers could do that. Well, there's a lot of reports that transformers were blowing up. You know how they don't blow up? You flip the switch off. So why didn't that company that runs their power have the foresight to know that, hey, this is a high windy day. Hey, trees are probably going to blow over into power lines. You know, we should get ahead of this and shut it down. Or at very least, as soon as we see a problem on our grid, we shut that leg off. But they didn't. And they allowed this to happen. So, unreal. Next question. I want to know why after the power went out beginning on Monday, more people weren't evacuated. So in some places, they shut the power and the cell phones off. So a lot of these people didn't have any connection to the outside world, because, you know, most people don't have landlines anymore and stuff like that. Well, if you've got no power and you've got no cell phone service, then how are you going to get informed? You're not. So that's why a lot of these people didn't know what was going on. Now, I would argue, you know, not to throw shade on any of the people that died or whatever, but I would argue that part of the reason that the death numbers are so high is because everybody in America, including Hawaii, walks around with their head up their ass, and they think somebody else is going to come and take care of them. Again, I can't think of a better example of reasons you should be having a prepared mind, having your shit together in case you have to get out of a sticky situation. It could be anything from a wildfire, a tornado, a hurricane, a tsunami, whatever, World War III, the invasion on the southern border, Civil War, I mean, on and on and on, economic collapse. There's a whole host of reasons you should be prepping. But one of those most important things is just being, situationally aware of what's going on. I mean, if the wind's blowing 100 fucking miles an hour and it hadn't rained in a long ass time, probably going to be some wildfires. You should probably keep your head on a swivel and have your car loaded up and ready to go. Tragic, man. Next question. I want to know if and how Lahaina residents, if they had lost power and cell phone access, as I did, were being warned about the encroaching fires. That's a great question, because that official earlier that decided not to blow the tsunami horns because he was afraid people were going to run up into the mountains and get burned up, he claimed that they were text messaging and calling people and stuff like this and telling people messages on TV. If you have no power and you have no cell service, you're not going to get the fucking message. It's pretty simple. I want to know, what did authorities do between when the Lahaina fire first began that morning and when it flared up many hours later that afternoon? So apparently, at some point, they thought they had the fire under control, and then it flared back up. And again, it goes into this issue of, that diversity equity guy not allowing the water tanks to be filled up because he was worried about, hurting somebody downstream or something like that. I mean, just fucking believable. You can't make this stuff up. These people are going to get us all killed if you trust them, unless you look out for yourself, unless you prepare yourself and your family for an emergency situation like this, where you may have to evacuate. You may have to go out and swim out into the ocean just so you don't get burned alive because your government officials are so incompetent they don't know their ass from a hole in the ground. Next question. I want to know why the island's warning sirens were never activated. We've kind of already covered that. I want to know why authorities did not do more to prevent what seems like an entirely predictable and avoidable tragedy. That's the million-dollar question right there. Why didn't they have something in place already? I read articles earlier in the week that they were saying that part of the reason these fires took off like they did is because in the past, when Hawaii was more free, there were a lot of farmers out there around that area, around Lahaina, all around Maui. There was lots of farms, and they made, like tropical fruits and stuff that you can't grow anywhere else, and they probably did quite well. But the overregulation of the EPA, the state government, the federal government, basically put these farmers out of business. And guess what? The farms are sitting there vacant now. So it's just a big, empty, unmanicured, unkempt lawn. It's a field that's fire tender all around because these farmers aren't allowed to farm it anymore, or they're priced out of existence. So that's what's going on. Next question. I want to know how a whole town was able to be wiped out in a single day. I mean, great question. Great question. We'll never get the real answer to that because everyone right now is playing cover their own ass. See? Everybody's trying to cover up what happened. Last question. I want to know who's responsible for this. And again, another million-dollar question. Who's responsible? I've already told you. State, local, federal, town, city, county governments are responsible for this. All these deaths are on them. Now, admittedly, the federal government has less control than the state government, and they have less control, direct control, than the city and county governments and stuff like that. But it's just unreal. And a lot of people are speculating that this whole thing was allowed to, I'm not saying that they said it intentionally or they did anything intentionally like that, or a lot of speculation was going around that this was some kind of space lasers from China and stuff. I don't believe that. I think this is pure incompetence. It's easy to see. You look around anywhere in our government, any system that they have taken control of, it's filled with incompetence. It's filled with potentials of massive casualties like this. Death and destruction. That's what they bring you. A lot of people are speculating that the reason they allowed it to burn up like they did is so that they would be able to burn out people that, old generational families that had generational farms and generational lands that didn't want to sell. And it's like I think it's the second most highly sought after real estate in the world. So, you've got people like Zuckerberg and Bill Gates and Oprah Winfrey and on and on and on, Barack Obama. All these richy uber elites have land there in Maui or near Maui. So if this fire causes, I heard the report, I guess it was like 2 or 3 days ago, the state government of Hawaii is actually saying, yeah, we're considering buying up this land because, we don't know if we want to make it into like a refugee camp for the people that got burned out, or if we want to turn it into a big open space where it'd be like a park area or whatever, things like that. They're trying to get their greedy little fingers on somebody else's property rights. And that's what they're using this for, guys. So, all that being said, that's the reason I've hesitated to make a video about this. I wanted to get all the facts first. And just as I thought initially, this is government incompetence on a state, local, and federal level, all the way around. FEMA can't do anything to save your ass when the flames are coming. Only you can save your own ass by being situationally aware of your surroundings and your environment, and knowing that, for one, you could have done things if you'd have known something like this was coming. You could have had the vegetation around your house and stuff like that down to a minimal, to where it would at least minimize the risk of your house burning up and stuff like that. But no, these people didn't do any of that. And unfortunately, a lot of them got burned alive. I keep seeing this image. I can't remember the name of that place. I'm drawing a blank right now on the name of that place. But there was that place in history where they found all these people that had been basically fossilized by a volcano that exploded nearby. What is the name of that place? I'm going to draw a blank till I turn the video off. But you guys that, know what I'm talking about. There's, those places where they found these people that were turned into statues, and they're because the lava was coming down and raining down on them. Anyway, that's sort of what I visualize when I think about this tragedy in Hawaii and how preventable all of this stuff was, with just a little bit of forethought, a little bit of, government planning, emergency planning. This could have all been avoided. Another thing that comes to my mind right now is that this proves to me they want us dead. They don't want us out there. They don't, and it doesn't matter if you voted Democrat or Republican or whatever. This is, in my opinion, part of population control. That's the reason we're seeing more and more of these tragedies just going the way they're going, is because they want us dead. So, anyway, guys, what a tragedy. And again, my thoughts and prayers, and, my heart just melts for these people that are having to go through this, especially those that lost family members. But, I can't help but think about all those children, all those properties, all the the pets, the animals, the livestock, all the other stuff. The infrastructure is gone. It's burnt to the ground. So I'm sure all those developers are sitting there licking their lips and ready to move in. And I'm not against development. I'm not against people going in and making money in a normal circumstance. But using a tragedy like this to enrich yourself is pure evil. Pure fucking evil. And we shouldn't tolerate it, but for whatever reason we do. So guys, let me know what your thoughts are on this Maui fire and everything else. Let us know if you lost people, and God bless you. Watch out for yourself. Cover your own ass, because the federal government, the state government, the local government can't do it. They've rendered themselves incompetent to the utmost degree. I don't think there's any fixing this crap now. We're screwed. So I appreciate you guys tuning in. Until then, we'll see you next time.